Shabbat Shalom. I recently watched a documentary on Netflix called Found. It's a very, very moving documentary, and it's about three Chinese American girls in their late teens who were adopted and who find out through doing the gene testing on Ancestry.com that they're all cousins, first cousins, and they all come from the same area in China. And so the documentary follows these girls as they find each other and become friends online. And then they hire a young woman in China to go and look for their families, their birth parents in China. And the background, of course, of all of this is the one-child policy in China. And the story of thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of other girls just like them who were abandoned by their parents, who were often too impoverished to pay the government fine when you had more than one child, and because they were in a culture that favors boys instead of girls. And so they search for their biological parents, and the film does not exactly have a Hollywood ending, but it really is so touching, and it's really about the struggles of everyday people living in an often broken world and struggling with what fate has given them. And so we get to meet some of the poor Chinese farmers who had been faced with this incredibly difficult decision, what to do with the birth of a second child or more, and who had to abandon their daughters. And the documentary goes and shows the professional these girls hire going to find people who may be the match but who don't know. And as these farmers start to revisit what happened to them, 18 years before, 20 years before, having to give up their daughters and all the pain that they carry and the shame and their hopes suddenly to be reunited. They never knew what happened to their child. And saying the hope that this might be it, and to see all those emotions, really something. And also the complexity of the inner worlds of these three girls growing up in families that are completely different than theirs, where they look different. One is in Tennessee, the other is in Oklahoma, and the third grows up with a conservative Jewish family in Washington State. And their struggles as they realize they don't quite belong. And there's this part where the Jewish one, who's been going to day school since she's little and is now in high school, and she had her bat mitzvah in Jerusalem, and she approaches her family and she says she does not want to go to Jewish school anymore. She wants to be with other people who look like her. And the extreme emotion and deep emotions and trauma that all girls feel, even though they grew up in these wonderfully loving and supportive families, but what happened to them in their very first years of life, and they all have this sense of abandonment, of having been unwanted, and they all wonder, why was it? And it's one of the reasons they seek out their birth families. And I won't ruin the whole movie, but as they get to China, you see these orphanages with rooms of 20 babies in one room and one person to take care of all 20. And even the complexity of the emotions of the parents, all seem to be incredible parents, but as they watch their adopted children, whom they love, just unconditionally seek out their pasts, and they try and do everything they can to support them and their own feelings through all of it. And one of the adopting women ends up getting divorced with her husband, and she talks about, was it fair to bring her daughter all the way from China to have her live in a split home? In the end, it all becomes about this harsh world that we all inhabit, with all the sufferings and pains and the loads we each carry. But then there's also another part, which is the really incredible and touching power of love and of connection, of our human hearts to move beyond the world that's around us. And these three teenage girls who discover their cousins, and they become the closest of friends so quickly, and finally they find another human being who can understand what they are and what they go through, and they end up crying on each other's shoulders, and they don't have to speak because they know exactly what the other is going through. And it's incredible to see the love of the parents supporting them, taking them to China through their journey, and their just complete and unconditional support for these girls who are not their biological children. And even the women who work as the nurses in these orphanages, one nurse taking care of 20 babies at the same time, and their tears when the American women who they met when they first adopted the girls come back to China and talk to them, and they remember how much that girl weighed, how many hundreds of babies they had, but they remember how much they weighed, what their character was like. They remember all of it. Even the potential biological parents who gave away a child, and to see their tears as they remember, and even their tenderness as they felt they had no choice but to abandon their child, but did everything they could, giving all of their life savings and putting it next to the child, or putting it there right before the rush hour so that immediately someone would find them and they wouldn't be out in the cold for too long. Really about the harshness of life, but the incredible and resilient power of our humanity. And in our parasha this morning, Rebecca, so many of our matriarchs is barren, but she cries to God, and God hears Rebecca's plea, and he answers, and she conceives. But she has twins inside of her, and they cause her such pain inside of her, and that she cries out in pain and asks God why. And the Or HaChaim explains, because of their incessant movement inside, gave her the sensation of being crushed. And God speaks to her and reveals to her that there are twins inside of her, and they'll be warring with each other. That her sons are destined to be opposites, and they will pull the family apart. And the hunter, the rougher one, as we find out, Esau, is loved by his father, while Jacob, the younger one, the gentle one who dwells in tents, is loved by his mother Rebekah. And we just witnessed a ruthless struggle between the two as they try and hold on to power and for their family's blessing and inheritance. And every one of us can relate to some of the emotional content of this story, to the power of jealousy and anger and what it creates in families, the pain of feeling unwanted, the dynamics of love, and the struggle that each of one has to deal with the destiny, with what life has given every one of us, what God and the universe has handed us. And the inner turmoil that every one of us undergoes with all of our limitations, our demons, our temptations. And the world that the Torah portrays here and throughout the book of Genesis sometimes appears harsh and broken, and often it's from our own human actions, right? Esau brought it onto himself. He sold his inheritance for a bowl of soup. And Jacob's jealousy and the way he treated his older brother. And looking at the story and some of the other stories, you can't but help but wonder, even if they brought it onto themselves, why did it seem to have been set up for failure from the very beginning? Could it not have been arranged a different way? Could this world not have been arranged a different way to create all of this difficulty, all of this suffering? And yet we also see there also the incredible tenderness in the story, even in this story. The love of Isaac for both of his sons, his sadness for his elder son Esau when he realizes that he's given everything to Jacob, and yet he knows this is what was meant to be. And the cry of Esau as he realizes he has lost everything, and he's been duped, and he will now receive the spiritual blessing, and he will now receive the physical blessing. Then the end was also dear to him, and he cries to his father, "Is there no blessing left for me?" and the presence of God through all of it. And the message of this parsha is not simple. We live in a challenging, broken world that we humans, with all of our sensitivities, often feel unsuited for. Our hearts are broken again and again by loss, by failure. And yet those very losses open our hearts and our capacity to feel, to love, to empathize. And they push us to go through extraordinary transformations and journeys that deepen us as human beings and help us grow and evolve. And even in the most difficult of circumstances, we are also able to feel humanity. It's maybe dafka in those circumstances that we feel that humanity most deeply, as we're stretched to feel and express the image of God within. As the 16th century mystic Isaac Luria taught, God created the universe, the physical world, but it could not hold the light of the infinite, and it shattered into endless shards of light that were lodged inside husks of physicality. And so we live in a world of such complex feelings and truths, joys and sadnesses, but we also can repair the world. We can heal. And every time we reveal the love that is beneath all of it, the love in those moments of connection, and we open our hearts, we bring our world a little bit closer to wholeness. In the documentary, the Chinese professional they end up finding to help them find their birth parents, herself had been unwanted as a girl by her father because she was a girl, but her grandparents had convinced her parents to keep her. But that also made her feel unwanted, and her whole life her parents had also always favored her brother over her. And she told a story of once her father taking her brother to one of the top restaurants, and she tried to get into the elevator to go with them, but her father pushed her out of the elevator and said, "No, this is only for your son." And her response was to do this job of all jobs, to do everything she could to reunite families across the world, to help these farmers and give them a little bit of time to process what they had been through, to provide a little healing, a little joy, a little love. And I shared the story of this documentary also because November is Adoption Month. And perhaps adoption is one of those places in life that most powerfully shows our humanity and our capacity to love and the power of love to overcome all obstacles. We each experience all these feelings in our lives. And we pray that the moments of tenderness and connection heal us and heal our world and bring us closer to our truest selves, to be better human beings and creators of a better world. Shabbat Shalom.